The KMC Conquest BAC-5051E webinar. We're really excited to have you here to learn some of the great features we have with our router. And without further ado, we're going to get things moving along. So my name is Andrew Reynolds. I'm the video production specialist here at KMC Controls. And today I have a special guest, Erich Kreuter. He's the VP of Product Development here, and he's going to be walking us through some stuff on the router today. As we go through this webinar, I really want everyone to make sure they ask all the questions that they want to get answered. You can type that right into the GoToWebinar system. We'll try to tackle most of those things live on the air. If we don't, we'll try to get to them within the chat and or via email after the fact. So just highlighting a few of the points and things we're going to be going over. We're going to be looking at the routing tab with the configuration and status page, looking at diagnostics with device status, token use, metrics, and MSTP capture. And then we're going to actually look at the advanced tab and some VAV balancing and what that kind of looks like. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring Erich in, and he's going to take us through some of the router web pages.
Good morning, guys. Thank you, Andrew. For everybody know, out there, this is Erich Kreuter, and I can walk you through a few of the pages here on the router this morning. This is a router we have on a local network here at the office, and let's log in and take a peek. So when you log into the router, you come to the device homepage. On this page, we can set the device name, the description, and then some of the BACnet properties of where this device is going to show up in your network tree. So this one happens to be configured for instance number 25051, and like I said, it's on one of our demo panels here in the office. Let's look at the first page that you're probably going to go to if you're installing one of these permanently, which would be the configuration web page. The Conquest BAC-5051E router supports 2 IP networks simultaneously. So these are BACnet IP networks. Here we have them both enabled, denoted by the green background that you see in both of those boxes. Quite commonly, we see them set up, the first one for a normal BACnet IP network. And then if you're going to use that second IP port, a lot of times you would configure that for a BBMD. We're going to use a BBMD to jump across a subnet, in your IT system. We need that BBMD configured to route the BACnet traffic across that barrier. So you can configure the BBMD table here. Put the table in each router. It needs to be the same in each router, and then everything will be working properly. The last IP type port, this would be a BACnet Ethernet port. So if we're picking up BACnet Ethernet controllers, or if we want to have broadcast traffic enabled, maybe during that initial setup of getting some IP controllers up and online before you switch them over, or if there's any third-party stuff out there that you want to use that BACnet Ethernet traffic for, you can enable that port. Generally, we do shut this off, or we recommend people shut this off, so that way we don't create any broadcast storms. If you have multiple routers that are all trying to route on Ethernet and route on IP, you will create a router loop, and it's good practice just to shut that port off after you're done commissioning. So on the bottom, we'll talk about that MSTP port next. Again, here you'll see that it is enabled, denoted by that green background. We got the baud rate cranked up to 115.2, and I will say our max master is not set. We'll see why that's important for this demo in a little bit. And we've got a network number of 1102 configured. In the middle, talk about some of the router core features. The router is active, again, with the green background. We've chosen to route on startup because this is a permanently installed router. If it were a technician tool where we just want to get on and sniff, maybe we want to decide when we want to enable routing, we would uncheck these. One feature that I think is really cool, if you've ever tried to jump on a BACnet network where you don't necessarily know the network number, you're walking on another technician's job site, or we can't find the as-built, or something seems a little off, the BAC-5051E will try to discover or it'll listen to the network to try to figure out what this learn network number would be. If we have this selected, the router will use that for communication, and it'll tell you that, hey, we've got a mismatched. This one says NA because they do match. But if we had this one misconfigured and we were talking on another network, it'd say, hey, the active network is 1101, you're configured for 1102, we're going to use 1101 until you change your configuration form to match. So good feature if you're jumping on someone else's network or a building you don't go to very often and you don't necessarily know how it's configured. The next routing page is the route status page, and this shows all the other networks that this router has access to, either directly or remotely. Here in our table, we can see that it's directly connected to 3 networks. So these are ones, probably the MSTP port, and then the BBMD, and then the IP. There are a few other network routers or BACnet routers on this demo panel. So as we can see here, these 4 other networks are probably connected to those other routers. It's good to know, especially when we're going to do something like VAV balancing, because I know in this demo panel, all of our VAVs are located on a secondary router on a couple of these other networks. So checking this route status page lets me know that I can get all my BACnet traffic over there properly. The next page is security. We'll take a quick couple comments here. This is where I would set up all my user roles if I want to put in another login, maybe just for a balancer or for another technician. I can define what role I want to give them, or I can create something custom. So I can choose, yes, I want them to see the configuration, see the diagnostics, see the security, but not change anything. But we're only going to let them do some VAV commissioning or VAV balancing work. You can pick and choose what you like. So with that, we'll get into a little more exciting stuff. We will not save the changes. And we'll look at our MSTP Diagnostics. The first page here is a basic status page. It gives you a visual status of what MSTP MAC addresses are out there on the network. Here we've got 8 devices total on the network, 1 being this router, and then 7 controllers. They're all color coded, so green means that MAC address is active. If one of these devices were to go offline temporarily, you'd see that box turn gray. White is undiscovered, so we don't see anything at that MAC address. And then the other color to look for would be red. Red happens when there's a lot of errors being generated around that MAC. So that could mean that you have maybe bad wiring, but more commonly probably multiple things configured for that MAC or duplicate MACs. Could also be a baud rate mismatch, but gray and red would be a quick visual cue that, hey, something's unhealthy with my network at that point. Let's go start there as I troubleshoot my network. On the bottom end of this page, you get some basic numerical metrics. So again, number of devices online. I can see my average token cycle time. There is some network polling going on here, so we'll see that token cycle time jump around a little bit. Still very good timing. But as some of those controllers are doing some point passing, we see that token time go up and down. A couple of things that are common that we always look for, highest MAC discovered. So here is 7, and that highest max mastery and use is coming out of panel number 7 is for 22. When we go to the next page, we can see that visually looking at the token use page. So you see here, instead of a status of if I'm online, here we're going to show you how long each one of those nodes is holding on to the token. If we are passing that token in under 100 milliseconds, you'll see green. We turn that yellow when you start bumping up against that APDU timeout. And then if something is holding onto the token too long and violating that timeout, will turn it red. On the last page, or the last number here, that highest max master in use is 22. So that's as high as the last one's going to pull, looking for that other panel to, or the next panel to pass that token to. The light blue field here that we see flashing is that pull for master activity. It's always good, if you follow kind of KMC best practice, we want you to set that max master, 3, 4, or 5 higher than the last MAC in the chain. That way you have room to add more panels later, and create that polling that goes up, but you're not necessarily leaving it unconfigured at 127 and eating up a lot of time and bandwidth of your network just polling for the token. So just like in the bottom of the pages, we saw some other numerics. We've got a page for some little more robust Wireshark type metrics. These are numbers that we go through what these mean in some of our router videos on diagnostics. Things like transmit frame counts, receive frame counts, what kind of errors we're seeing. We can compare these numbers to see the relative health of the traffic the router is either generating on the network or seeing on the network. And again, if you dive in and really want to troubleshoot MSTP, these are numbers that that we're going to be interested if we're on the phone trying to help you. So the next page here is an MSTP Capture function. This creates a PCAP file or a Wireshark type file for MSTP traffic that the 5051E is managing. From a capture window, we can do about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on your baud rate and depending on how much traffic is on your network. Generally, that's good enough to diagnose most issues. The cool thing here is if you can get to the router web page, you can take a capture. So you're not having to drive out to the job site, wire up a third-party dongle, get other software open, and do all of that just to grab a capture. If you've got a machine you've got remote desktop access into or other software access into, then you can grab this MSTP Capture without actually having to be by the router itself. When you finish your capture, it just downloads from the browser session to your local laptop, and then you can load that into Wireshark or email that to the correct person that needs to see it. So that wraps up the diagnostics. The next thing we're going to look at is some of the advanced tab features. The first one, we'll quickly touch on firmware. You can certainly upgrade the firmware in a router. We're using KMC Connect. More commonly, we probably upgrade router firmware if it's just 1 or 2 on a job using the web page. So here you can choose the file, and it'll ask you if you want to commit the firmware and then restart the router. This one happens to be running version 1.207. Similarly, if you want to configure this router from a file, say you have a standard router configuration that you use from job to job, we can save that configure off in a little JSON file and then re-import that to another router on the new job. The place we're going to spend the last amount of time here is in our VAV configuration and balancing pages. We have a few VAVs on this demo panel. They start at BACnet instance number 8000. So we can type the starting range in the first box, and then we're going to look for device instances from that number up to 50 more than that number. So 80, 50 in for our example here today. Here we found 3 BAC-8000 panels. They happen to all be simply VAVs. The first thing you'll see is that we'll read out the device instance, the device name, the model number that that controller is reporting. And then also the primary or the flow coefficients or the correction factors that a balancer would be interested in. So this BAC-5001 looks like it has not been balanced. We know that because the default values for the slope and offset and the low flow correction are all at their defaults, 101. But it does look like somebody's tried to balance this BAC-8005 because these numbers are off their defaults. And then the third one is a dual duct, so you get the both the primary and the secondary. If you'd like to, you can always export this table. It's just going to download that in a CSV, and then you can use that for your as-built or for your records. Let's jump into this 8005. So there's a few other options we have here in the workspace of this web page now. The first one is this configure tab. Generally, for anything related to what a balancer would do, we can change the flow limits here on this web page. So they don't have full access to all the configuration options in the VAV, but for things that they might want to tweak or things that are going to be on the airflow schedule, we can use this web page to set those or reconfigure them if we need be. So min and max heating and cooling flows, the K factor, the reheat or the auxiliary flow limit, and then if you're familiar with the VAVs, they do have a little motor pause. So this in effect slows the actuator down, and as you get close to that flow set point, helps stabilize your airflow if your static pressure is jumping around a little bit. So once everything's configured correctly, we can go into the balancing sequence. This uses the same balancing sequence that the net sensor would or the digital sensor would. Once this sequence is initiated, it's going to drive the box to the highest maximum. It's going to allow you to enter the actual measured maximum. Once it sees that you put a value in there, it's going to stroke the box to the lowest minimum. And again, let you put in the actual minimum that you're measuring with an airflow hood. And then it's going to calculate the flow coefficients here. So if we were to do this balancing sequence with live airflow, after we've gone through the sequence, you would see this chart update with the new correction factors and slopes. The third tab here is a command tab. So this is a good way to make a box do something temporarily as you're either checking it out or troubleshooting. Maybe you've got several outlets from one VAV box, and you want to make sure that they got 200 CFMs spread evenly across 4 outlets, and you need to do a little accessory balancing. We can come in here and give it a flow set point temporarily. To do that, I would just hit the command button. It's going to write that flow set point out at manual override level or priority 8, and then if this were a box that I was on live airflow, we would see that actual airflow stroke up and go and control at 250. If any of these overrides are active, we do leave the command button green, and you'll also see here in the table of the chart that the background of this radio button stays green as well. Just for a visual cue that, hey, something is in manual, we're going to want to make sure we revisit that box and relinquish the control that we've put in. We can turn the fan on and off or command it to a fan speed. The feature here that I think is really cool is here on the discharge air temperature at the bottom. I could turn stage 1 on and go ahead and command that, and then I can see that hey, my discharge air is actually rising, means my valve's hooked up the right way or my reheat's hooked up the right way, and is working properly. If I want to do any air handler balancing, I can navigate off of this controller and command other devices. So say we can command this one to 250 as well. And I I could have all of my VAVs with a airflow command and then do any AHU balancing or tweaking that I want. And then I can just come back into my table here and we'll relinquish these in kind of the order that we set them. And as those commands clear and refresh, we should see these drop away. Yep. So the last router feature then would be the time functionality. The router can be a time sync master on your network. So here we see a little bit of how to set that up. You can choose which networks you want to sync to. Here we see that of the 3 networks that are active, we're not currently syncing time, but if we'd like to sync them to UTC, local, or both, we can configure that here. We can manually force a time sync message. Most commonly, I think that we would configure an NTP server. This could be any NTP server that's out there, either locally in the IT department or could be Google's or NIST, that sort of thing. And we can use that for our time reference. So with that, I think we've finished all of the router web pages. And if you guys have any questions, we can answer those now. And if not, we'll turn it back over to Andrew.
Well, thank you, Eric. As you guys are putting in those questions, I'm just going to go over something I wanted to share. And thank you again, that was really great. So right here, just wanted to reiterate from our last webinar, we also talked about this. We do have a training session September 25th through the 28th in Anaheim, California. It's going to be 4 days of fun where we're talking about KMC Connect, Converge GFX, and we only have 2 seats left. So make sure if you want to get into that class to go ahead and register on our partner portal. Is there anything that you see in the field with the router, like helpful tips or little tricks, questions that you always get asked, things like that?
Sure. The thing that we probably get the most is when we show people the diagnostics of the router and the learned networks capabilities. As a technician, those two, really work well together. There's no reason that every tech shouldn't have one of these in their bag. Any KMC technician, when we go on a job site, the first thing we do is plug our router in, jump on the network, and check out those MSTP diagnostics. It's the quickest and easiest way to make sure that, yes, I know that my MSTP is working properly. I'm probably going to be in a good position to fire up Connect and jump on and do a full discovery, or I know that hey, my BACnet's relatively healthy. And if I'm having issues, I need to go look in the front end, or I need to go look at how Niagara is configured and fire up some more software.
Awesome. So we do have one other question. Can multiple VAVs be commanded and in the balancer at the same time?
Technically, yes. You could allow them to stroke at the same time. I think from a usability, we'd have to try it out, make sure that works for you. But yeah, the VAVs, if they could be balancing at the same time, especially if you're using net sensors or the router. You just want to make sure that one technician isn't trying to balance the same thing that another one would.
And then they also kind of qualified it with one command.
Not with the same command. You're going to have to initiate balancing at each controller individually. But if you want to override those override commands could certainly be valid at the same time. Again, everything could have some manual override, and that chart will tell you kind of what's left in override or not.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So that looks like all the questions. Oh, wait, there we go. Can you spend some more time, let's see, on the diagnostic screen? Let's see. Let's bring that back in here.
Oh, you'll have to save my time changes here.
Of course.
So if we go to the diagnostics screen, the question was related to what would a bad network look like, or if it was unstable. And you'll have to kind of use your imagination as I talk about it. This is a pretty ideal network. So we have a reasonable number of MSTP nodes. They're all tightly grouped. I have a max master set. My token cycle time looks excellent. If this were a bad network, I think that the first thing that I would see is, maybe I have 3 boxes that have turned gray. So if we can imagine 4, 5, and 6 being gray, that would mean that, hey, someone probably cut my network wire, or I've lost power to that portion of the building. But something's happened where I don't have these other 3 devices up online. The other thing that I typically see would be a lot of MAC address gaps. So instead of being sequential, maybe we have a couple, 3, 4, 45, 57, 68, 69, 70, and everything's very spread out. The reason we don't like doing that is as I pass the token, the MSTP token, device 3 and 4 would have to pull and still continually look for everything at all the addresses until it finds that next true panel that's online. So we're eating up more time on your network. We're passing that token a lot more slowly than we otherwise should. And things just don't happen as fast. And generally what happens there is we get you can still have reliable communication, but if we're making off-panel requests, and especially when a front end's up online looking for data to put on a graphic, you're going to see some slower responsive on your graphic. The other thing that we typically see when we find an MSTP that may not be as healthy as it could be, a lot of times if we look at token usage, you might see 1 or 2 that are yellow or red. A lot of times we find that for peripheral products, maybe it's an OEM controller on a chiller, or a smart BACnet actuator or something like that. Things that you might have 1 or 2 on a job. Maybe they have baud rate restrictions where they can only talk 9600 or 19.2. A lot of times, you'll find that devices like that, it's just best to segment that and put them on their own network, on their own router, and keep all the VAV boxes or air handlers, that sort of thing, on one big trunk, and kind of keep the guys, or the third-party guys that may or may not be following as tight a timing as others, put them on their own network.
So it looks like we have a question about kind of the recommended MSTP baud rate. Can you kind of shed some light on that?
Sure. KMC, we currently ship everything at 38.4. I would say 38.4 has been the most common baud rate for quite a number of years now. It's a good compromise between speed and bandwidth, and also wire quality. More and more people are starting to go to 76.8. The BACnet standard allows up to 115.2, so you can certainly run that fast per the standard. But remember, the faster you try to talk, the more important that wire resistance and really the capacitance rating of that wire is important. So if you're going to talk at 76.8, you want to make sure you're getting good low cap wire, in the proper gauges. As a manufacturer, we default to 38.4 because it seems to be the most tolerant across all of the different types of wire that are either out there today or are readily available.
Very good. So we're almost out of time, but we're going to take about 1 or 2 more little questions here. So going back to the unstable bus status, what kind of will actually cause that? I mean, will a device powered off cause that?
Generally, if a device is powered off, assuming it's wired properly, a device powered off would not cause an unstable status. I would say more commonly if a device is offline, or could be unpowered, offline because it's unpowered. There's probably some other wiring issue there or power related issue that we want to tackle. Again, if you're familiar with KMC, you'll know that all of our MSTPs, we have the little light bulbs that would glow if you have phasing issues. Things like that would be good visual cues that I've probably got a wiring problem to go diagnose. So if I see unstable node in my network and I go there and check it out, check your wiring, check your light bulbs, and go from there.
Awesome, thank you. So we're going to take one more question. So the Macs, why do they start from 1?
So this is a demo panel that we use for some of our test products. It's a dedicated setup. So the technician that uses this most often started them at 1 because he knows he's not adding any user interface or connect tool in those lower Macs. The best recommendation, so if you look at the router in my briefcase that I take out, I start generally on my networks, I start them out at 3 and go up from there. That way, if I want to have some other router or a connect node or other BACnet software, I've got 2 Macs kind of on the bottom to always know that I can insert a controller there. But it's kind of whatever your preference is, as long as you're following the rules and being consistent, you shouldn't have any problems.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you, Eric, for taking the time to do this webinar with us.
Sure.
And I also want to thank everyone for your great questions. And just going forward with future webinars and different things like that, we're going to be sending out an email a little bit later today where you can kind of give us a survey and some feedback on future webinars, things you want to hear about from KMC. And also, we're going to be sending out more information just on our products in general, things like that. So without that further ado, we want to thank you again for attending and have a great day.